Hello and welcome back to Mad Mouse Games. Today I'm going to be taking this ogre here and seeing if I can make it look like this. The box art that came on the package. So we're going to go ahead and start off with the base coats. I decided to do a yellow on the skin because in the box art it is somewhat yellowish. It's not too bad or anything like that, but it was a little yellow, so I wanted to try something new this time, and that was taking the skin base coat and trying to layer a somewhat see-through layer of darker paint and kind of work it up like a wash. Um, and we'll get to that a little bit later in the video and see how it goes. Because it was definitely something new I wanted to try, and yeah, you'll see how it turns out. Anyways, so I base coated all the skin with a nice bright yellowish color. And once again, you can see here I'm using my big huge brush because that's what you do for base coats. It's probably the biggest thing I've learned, and unfortunately for this part of the video, the camera focused in on my knuckles because I wasn't paying too much attention. But you can see here I'm painting the bear skin that the ogre's wearing. Just did a nice dark brown on there to make it look nice and dark. Because in this miniature, there's kind of like a leather belt that goes around the middle, and that's in a lighter brown color. So I did the darkest brown that I had, put it all over, and then the next thing I started on was the next layer of leather, and just did it a slightly less darker brown all the way. That includes the ogre's gauntlet-like things. I did his club a little bit later in the darker brown, and there's like some leather wrappings around where the ogre's holding the uh, tree stump mace thing, and that was also something I did in the lighter brown color. And so you can see me just putting the base coats on real quick, and after that I went ahead and started to work on all the other little details that are on there. There's some skulls on the back, the rope, and the stone that's in its like wrapped up in the cord. So base coated all of that stuff, and then so I base coated all of that stuff, and then the next thing I was going to work on was the hair. Now, in the box art, the hair was kind of interesting. I thought it had a little bit of a bluish tint to it. So just like the ogre's skin, I decided to do a kind of dark grayish blue for his hair, and I was going to work that up towards more of a um like gray, like a darker gray, but that way it keeps that little bit of blue. So you can see me here just putting on a rest of those little details, getting the base coat on those so it looks nice and good. Now, about this time in the video, this is where you get to see me kind of catch up a little bit to where I've been talking, so it's a good time to just pop open a nice cold soda and enjoy. Mmm. Ah, good stuff, man. So, that's kind of how this part goes. You can see me here now putting the blue on for the ogre's beard, and then I'll go and put that on for its hair as well. Now, one thing that it was kind of interesting about this miniature, so this is it just with the base coats compared to the box art. And then I did a wash, which again didn't show up on my camera, which is getting kind of frustrating, but that's what it looks like after the wash and how it compares to the box art. So then I went in and I decided to start with the bear skin that's on it. Now on the box art, you can see they kind of just did a quick little dry brush of some lighter brown, and so you can see me putting that on here. I went ahead and did a nice kind of thicker one because I like to pick out a lot more of those hairy details. I thought about going back in later with an even lighter color of brown to pick out just some smaller areas, but I ended up not doing it because, for one, I thought it was fairly close already to the box art because the box art didn't go back and do that. So, you can see me here just dry brushing it. Then the next part we went on to was the rest of the leather. Now, for this part, I decided to use something that I've had for a long time. It was an Army Painter quick shade wash something or other. And basically what it does is it just waters down your paints a little bit. So I added a little bit of that to like basically the same color I dry brushed the ogre's like bear pelt, and then I just applied it basically on all the leather. You can see me here wiping some of it off with my fingers, just trying it out and testing it a little bit because I added a little bit more of the quick shade wash mixer stuff a little bit later right here. And basically what I wanted to do, or what I ended up doing, was putting that basically on all the leather. And then I came back through with a dry brush and I would pick up the parts where it had moved down into the cracks. And what this did was it left a nice little highlight, but it kind of like fades. So it's not a strong highlight. It looks like a fairly, even piece of material, and like it hasn't been painted because there's not brush marks. It flows nicely from the darker shades in the recesses to the lighter shades at the peaks of the fabric. And I thought it ended up looking really good. Now, one thing I noticed in the box art was also that the little rings around the ogre's gauntlets was basically just a lighter color of the highlight. And so what I did was I just applied that same liquid, I think like 2 or 3 different times to those areas. And that way they just stood out just a little bit from the actual gauntlets. I then went through, edge highlighted everything with that same color just to make it look really, really nice. And actually, I thought it turned out pretty good for what it was. It was kind of like, I mean, it wasn't wet blending, but it was a little kind of close to that, I think, because you would put the paint down and then just take out the stuff in the dark recesses, and it ended up looking pretty good. I also went back through, highlighted with white a lot of the ropes and things like that, and then here I decided I was going to put more of that stuff in to make it look translucent. Hopefully, that was kind of my goal, so that I could just put a very thin layer of paint over the yellow ogre skin, and that yellow would kind of show through the ogre's skin, like the light layer of paint I'm putting on now. Now, it didn't work out quite the way I wanted it to. You can see here, it kind of didn't really work very well, and at the end of this little bit, you'll see what it ended up looking like, which I did not like. So I went back through and I tried to do it one more time, just kind of like a light, basically translucent paint so that the undercoat would show a little bit through the outer layer, but it didn't really work. It's something that I'm definitely going to try again later, but you can see here, so this is after I applied the second time. So then I decided to try wet blending, which this is kind of the first time I think I've ever tried wet blending. So the basic idea is you put one color of the paint you want to use at the bottom of something or at one part of it, and then you put the other color you want to use that's kind of at the darker or the higher points, and then you kind of mix them slowly together so it looks like it fades, kind of like the ogre's gauntlets. And because basically the technique I tried with the ogre gauntlet, it didn't work very well with the way I was trying to do it. So I ended up trying to do this wet blending, and I thought it ended up turning out fairly good. It's definitely not perfect, and it's definitely a skill that I'm going to try and work on. Um, but it was something that I wanted to try. I've seen a lot of people do it, and it honestly wasn't that hard. It definitely is something that will take a lot of time to get skilled in. But one thing that I did do was basically all the high regions, so like the eyebrow area, kind of like the bony area in its face. A lot of the facial features, I made them a lot more yellow so they stood out more against the body. And that's one thing I was pretty happy about when I tried this wet blending. And so it's just something I did all over entire thing. And then after I was done with the wet blending, I went back through, did just a final little touch-ups like adding toenails, fixing the teeth, adding eyes, and things like that. And in the end, I thought it ended up looking pretty good. I just picked out a lot of these details at the end, added a little bit more of wet blending, and tried to make it look as close to the box art as possible. So this is my miniature that I painted. So you can see kind of the eyebrows and the ears, how they're a little bit of a lighter yellow color than the rest of its skin, and that's because I tried to wet blend those. And you can still see some spots where I didn't wet blend very well, particularly there on the back of the arm. But overall, I thought it ended up looking pretty good. And we'll go ahead and show a final image of the box art here. So here's the final comparison between what mine looked like, what the box art looked like, and honestly, I thought it turned out pretty close to the same. It's definitely not the exact same, it's not perfect, but I was pretty proud with what I did, and I'm going to be doing more of these later, trying to match the box art to what I did. If you liked it, leave a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.